Let me thank you for joining us this evening, those who are here with us and those who are watching online. It's Wednesday evening has always been for me one of those exciting times during the week. I've always enjoyed the special fellowship that comes from being together and sharing some time. It also is that kind of bump in the midst of the week that just gets us from Lord's Day to Lord's Day. And I appreciate the continuing opportunity of being able to share the Lord's message. Let me add to what Aubrey mentioned about new classes on Sunday. Mason is going to begin our teen class back up on third floor. So I want all of those who are listening, or parents, grandparents who are watching, you can pass that word along to our teens. Make sure they know this Sunday we'll resume class up there. World Bible School was mentioned. I believe our current teacher count is at 10 and would love to double that by the time that Brother Patton is with us in 3 weeks to share that training session. I do have some forms on the Lord's table up here if you would like to fill one of those out and let me know that you want to help. Well, we've been studying from the book of Job, and tonight let me take just a moment to kind of reset our study. You remember the story as it actually begins in heaven. It begins with Satan coming before God. It seems he has to report in. And the question arises from God, have you considered my servant Job? Job was a righteous man, a wealthy man, a blessed man, with a great family, a great religious relationship with God. And he says, if you considered my servant Job, he's such a righteous and upright man. And Satan says, the only reason he is because you treat him so well. If you remove those blessings, if you isolate him, if you harm him, he'll curse you to his face, to your face. Well, God grants him that privilege, and in a set of incremental events, we have the loss of all of his possessions, the death of all of his children. We have the loss of his own health that he has, and he's outside the city waiting for something to happen, but nothing is improving. There are 3 friends who have come, and they have sat with him for a time and have now, in the chapters we've explored, shared their thoughts, their observations, sometimes their accusations. And so we've met Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar, and we've looked at what they've said and how Job responded. And so tonight we introduce a 4th individual. His name is Elihu. He is described in our text as being the son of Barachel the Buzite. Now there is a Buz that is a nephew of Abraham, possibility that there is some ancestral line. He was of the family of Ram. Ram, if I did my genealogical count correctly, would have been the 4th great-grandson of Abraham. Again, could be the same individuals, could be other families with the same name. But we do think the likelihood is that he's from the territory of Edom, off to the south and slightly to the east of what we think of as Palestine. He comes later, at least he is not mentioned as being with the 3 when they have arrived. Has he come during the 7 days? Has he come after that 7th day while some of them are talking? He's going to reference their speeches, so he's been there for a while. He's described as being younger, and he shows respect, or at least he says he is showing his respect by having waited till everybody else has weighed in on the situation, and then he has some things to say. Typically, as you study the material, even though it's in one block of 5 chapters, it's really 4 different speeches, 4 different places of content that he shares. But I'm going to suggest there are 3 basic themes, and that's the way we'll divide the material. Here's the text that mentions him from Job 32. But the anger of Elihu, the son of Barachel, the Buzite, of the family of Ram, burned against Job. His anger burned because he justified himself before God. And his anger burned against his 3 friends because they found no answer, yet they had condemned Job. Now Elihu had waited to speak to Job because they were years older than he. But when Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of the 3 men, his anger burned. So Elihu, the son of Barachel the Buzite, spoke out and said, I'm young in years, and you are old. Therefore I was shy and afraid to tell you what I think. a bit later in the chapter, I too will give my share of answers. I also will tell my opinion, for I am full of words. I love the expression, I am full of words. The Spirit within me compels me. Behold, my belly is like unvented wine, like new wineskins. It's about to burst. Let me speak so that I may get relief. Let me open my lips and answer. Let me be partial to no one, nor flatter any man, for I do not know how to flatter. Otherwise, my Maker would quickly take me away. Ever met Elihu somewhere in the course of life? I have to admit that as I read this every time, I am reminded of a much younger Don Loftus who had far more traits that resembled Elihu. I thought I had a lot more answers. Today I realize I didn't even know what the questions were I was trying to answer. I had a lot of words and have shared them throughout the years. Maybe sometimes on target, always, I believe, conscientiously delivered, but maybe flowing sometimes too much from my own frustration and my inexperience. But yet, I had something that I felt had to be said. And I'm going to suggest as we unfold the story of Elihu tonight, it's not because he has everything figured out. And it's not because I or you would endorse everything he says, nor will God. But Elihu has some fresh thoughts. Elihu comes from a generation that has some ideas that are worthy to be heard. And I think that's the lens to which we want to offer him. I said 3 themes. The first of the themes, he admits Job's gone too far. There are just some things Job has said that as he's heard that has put this pressure on his insides that needs to be vented. Part of what it is that is welling up inside of him is, I can't believe Job said that. I can't believe Job believes that. Job pleading his innocence, now Job's been pleading his innocence at least in the magnitude by which he feels the oppression of God has come in magnitude. But he's left the oppression at times that Job kind of feels he's innocent. He hasn't done anything wrong because Job's not free from sin. Picking up in chapter 33, verse 8 through 12. It says, you have in fact spoken while I listened, and I heard the sound of your words. I am pure, without wrongdoing. I'm innocent. There's no guilt in me. Now he's quoting or paraphrasing from Job's speeches. Behold, he invents criticism against me. He counts me as an enemy. He puts my feet in the stocks. He watches all my paths. Behold, let me respond to you. You are not right in this, for God is greater than mankind. He sees Job having maybe been just a little bit too assertive as to his own innocence and his own standing before God. Even that challenge, I wish I could have a hearing before God and we could have this thing settled. I wish I had an arbitrator who would be my lawyer to plead my case. He finds a bit too much. Well, why has God not responded? He's going to explain at least why he thinks God has not responded to these cries that Job has made. Because of the multitude of oppressions. They cry out, they cry for help because the arm of the mighty. But no one says, where is God, my Maker, who gives songs in the night, who teaches us more than the animals of the earth, and makes us wiser than the birds of the sky. There they cry out, but he does not answer because of the pride of evil people. God certainly will not listen to an empty cry, nor will the Almighty regard it. Now, that may sound a lot like the other 3 fellows, but there's a slight difference. He's not necessarily saying that the reason Job is getting no answer from God is because of wickedness A, B, C, and D. He is saying that Job's attitude of pride has distanced himself before God. Now, that's a sin, but it's an attitude as opposed to an act. And the other three guys have been wanting to see that he has somehow abused the orphan, taken advantage of the widow, stolen something that wasn't properly his. He's saying, Job, part of your problem is God isn't listening because your attitude is wrong. Your heart is wrong. And that's a bit of a new approach in our dialogue. And then there are several passages where in this theme, he just says, Job, you've gone too far. Your words are an affront to God. Oh, that Job were tested to the limit, because he answers like sinners, for he adds rebellion to his sin. He claps his hands among us and multiplies his words against God. At verse 16 of chapter 35, so Job opens his mouth with empty words. He multiplies words without knowledge. Well, theme 2 parallels that a bit, and it's one of the nice things that you see in Elihu's presentation. There's some measure of balance. He's been sitting back objectively listening to all of these dialogues. 3 speeches by Eliphaz, 3 speeches by Bildad, 2 by Zophar, and Job's responses to each. And he says, Job, I think you've gone too far. There's some things that bother me about what you've done. But then he turns and he looks at these friends and he says, you have also failed. Now, he had little to say about their failure to demonstrate compassion, and that's a different issue that we'll pick up in our conclusion. But they had never addressed Job's charges. Maybe you have been in a situation where you have presented some evidence, a charge, or you've raised a question, and then the people to whom you're talking never actually address that. You ask about one thing and they talk about everything else in the world, but they never really deal with what you said. He says, you 3 guys, you've listened to Job all this time, and Job keeps saying, and you never respond to what it is he's actually said. We read verse 3 earlier. His anger burned against his 3 friends because they'd found no answer. Yet they had condemned Job. But picking up at verse 11, behold, I waited for your words. I listened to your skillful speech while you pondered what to say. I also paid close attention to you, but indeed there was no one who refuted Job. None of you who answered his words. So do not say, we have found wisdom. God will defeat him, not man. But he has not presented his words against me, nor will I reply to him with your arguments. He's looking for a fresh approach. And that's going to be one of the highlights as we look through Elihu. Well, those are the balancing themes. Job had some shortcomings as he saw it. The 3 friends had their shortcomings in the discussion. Well, here's what Elihu offers. He offers a broader view of suffering. Maybe broader is not the word. Maybe it's new. Maybe it's fresh. I'm not sure what adjective you want in there, but he extends the discussion. If you've gotten bored with listening to the last 3 lessons because they sounded like the same thing coming from 3 different people and Job's responses just were over and over the same thing, tonight's is a little bit broader. He says that one of the things that suffering does in our world and in our lives is that it does get our attention. Chapter 33, verse 14. Indeed, God speaks once or twice, yet no one notices it. In a dream, a vision of the night, when the deep sleep falls on people while they slumber in their beds, then he opens the ears of the people and he horrifies them with warning, so that he may turn a person away from bad conduct and keep a man from pride. He keeps his soul back from the pit and his life from perishing by the spear. A person is also rebuked by pain in his bed, not just revelation or a dream or a vision. He is rebuked by pain in his bed and with constant complaint in his bones, so that his life loathes bread, eating, and his soul, food that he should crave. New thought here. One of the intent that suffering brings, or one of the blessings, if you will, that suffering brings, is a cry of attentiveness. It awakens us from living our lives in that rut of everything being the same. You know, we've been going to the same job. We've been having the same hobby. We've been having the same arguments, the same beef with this person. We eat the same. Everything's just running along in a treadmill. And all of a sudden, you have a heart attack. All of a sudden, you develop a tumor. And you don't know what the result's going to be from the biopsy. He says, if nothing else, you have been rebuked by the pain that you've suffered while you're sick. Behold, God does all these things for a man 2 or 3 times to bring back his soul from the pit. Now, pit is used kind of synonymously with this idea of Sheol, the afterlife, but it's the hollowness of that. If a person is just living their life with meaninglessness, they're just running through and they're doing all of the jobs and they're headed to go to end life in the pit, that's pretty terrible. That's sad. That's a waste. And so God's trying to bring people back from that precipice, from that edge, so that he may be enlightened with the light of life. Is it possible that Elihu is suggesting to us that suffering amongst humanity is really designed for us to be able to see the light of life, or in our case, the light of the Christ, and to see eternity in heaven as opposed to the pit, the end of meaninglessness? Chapter 36, verses 9 and 10. Then he declares to them their work and their wrongdoings, that they have been arrogant. And listen to this, and he opens their ears to instruction and commands that they return from injustice. I don't know how, and I don't know how much Elihu understood or he guessed, but he is saying there are times in our lives when God tries to open our ears to instruction, that there's a message for us. There's a wake-up call. And the wake-up call may be painful, but it's essential for our well-doing. Martin Israel says, it is one of the fundamental contributions of pain to make people wake up to a deeper quality of existence and to seek evidence for meaning in their lives beyond the immediate sensations that arrest their attention. The hedonism of our culture says pleasure is the ultimate goal. The problem with pleasure as an ultimate goal, it ends in the pit. There's nothing after that. And so some of the struggles that we have in life are those wake-up moments that calls us to say there has to be something more. There has to be something beyond, beside, above all of the things that we're looking at. Well, suffering gets our attention, but Elihu continues with a passage that says, let me share 3 possible divine motivations for suffering. And again, I'm not suggesting he's hit the nail on the head or that he has the final word on this. I am just thrilled to find somebody who's in the midst of this discussion who says, you realize maybe God is doing something good instead of something bad. This comes out of Job 37, 11 through 13. It's still Elihu talking. He also loads the clouds with moisture. He's in a section where he's talking about the power of God and the working of God and the expansiveness of God. He disperses the cloud of his lightning. It changes direction, turning around by his guidance, that it may do whatever he commands it on the face of the inhabited earth. Whether for, count them off here, whether for correction or for his earth or for goodness, he causes it to happen. It may not be an exhaustive list, but he says some of these things that God does in the world are for correction. They are designed to say, that's bad. You need to repent. You need to change. It could be for the benefit of his earth. Or if you can look at that as a broader sense, not earth as a globe and what's elementally in it, but that for the good of other people. You ever realize that sometimes things that are disadvantageous to one individual, one group of people, actually turn out to be a blessing to somebody else? That God, and again, it's difficult to always use that word providentially because I don't know what was in God's mind or what God was doing. Sometimes you look back and you think, that tragedy for that person opened the door of the gospel for these people. And that suffering that they had for 5 years as a family blessed a whole congregation, a whole community. Is it possible that the things that God does have a meaning beyond just the individual, for correction, but maybe for His earth or for goodness, to simply enhance the value, the virtues of a person's life? We'll see that at the end of our lesson. One of the things that Elihu does as you read through his chapters, he has an extraordinarily high view of God. I don't mean to suggest the other guys didn't, because Eliphaz was big into the holiness of God, and Bildad talks about the justice of God, and all of them recognize the power of God. Some passages that talk about the wisdom of God. So it's certainly not that they are vain in their treatment of who Jehovah is. But Elihu, if you read these chapters, he has a high view of God and God's relationship with humanity. Chapter 37. Now people do not see the light which is bright in the skies. Have you ever been there? That there are people who don't see the light which is bright in the skies. Why? Because they're mired either in the routines of life or their sufferings. But the wind has passed and cleared them. From the north comes golden splendor. Around God is awesome majesty. The Almighty, we cannot find Him. He is exalted in power. He will not violate justice and abundant righteousness. Therefore people fear Him. He does not regard any who are wise of heart themselves. You see how He exalts God and all of those different traits that He has? 35 in verse 10, but no one says, where is God my Maker who gives songs in the night? When we're in the night, and I think that's not just a period of darkness on the outside, but when you and I are in a stage of darkness in our lives, when it's night, we oftentimes don't say, where is God my Maker? Where is the one who gives me songs in the night? Elihu, I think, is on the edge of understanding that the God who blesses all of the time, blesses in the good times and the bad times. And that when you're going through suffering, God is still there and He is still offering a blessing. There's songs in your night, even when maybe we aren't aware or don't take note of them. John Piper says, Elihu does not picture God as an angry judge, but as a redeemer, a savior, a rescuer, a doctor. The pain He causes is like the surgeon's knife, not like the executioner's whip. Yeah, does God sometimes inflict pain? Are there aspects of judgment that we experience here on earth, consequences even of sin that we commit? Yeah, they're there. Do we live in a world that is almost overshadowed like the darkness of the clouds we've experienced for the last 5 days, and we feel covered up and weighted down by them? Yeah, but it's all a matter of how you look at God. Are you looking for the song in the night? Do you see God as an angry judge? Now that's the way Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar saw God. It wasn't that it's 100% in error. It's just an incomplete picture of Jehovah. Elihu begins to hint at that God is a redeemer, a savior, a rescuer, a doctor who uses the painful scalpel, sometimes without anesthetic, mind you, in order to cut out that which is bad or to rescue us from a danger that is imminent before us, for our good, for our protection. So, in the big picture of our study of the book of Job, Elihu serves as a bridge from the inadequacy of Job and the other friends' speeches until we reach next week's lesson when God takes the microphone, when God speaks. Elihu serves as a bridge from the inadequacy of what we've read to the ultimate message that's going to come from God Himself to the five of them, three friends, Elihu and Job, and to us as well. But before we wrap tonight's up, let me introduce you to this concept that I think Elihu has at least opened the lid of the box to think about. It is what I call creative suffering. And we'll build on that through God's speech, the concluding of the story in chapter 42, and then in our application lesson, the third week in November. Creative suffering. Learning to look for blessings in disguise. A couple of quotes and then a few scriptures before we finish the thought. I'm just introducing it for you can think about this over the next weeks. Simone Weil says, the extreme greatness of Christianity lies in the fact that it does not seek a supernatural remedy for suffering, but a supernatural use for it. Please soak in. Christianity isn't always raising the hand and saying, God, save me. Christianity says, God, use me. I don't understand where I am, don't understand what's going on, don't necessarily like where it is that it's going on, but God, use me. Jesus said, did He not, Father, if it be your will, and I know you're capable, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, your will be done. Why? Because the creative suffering of Jesus on the cross had a blessing that far exceeded, as hard as that is to say it far exceeded 6 hours on a cross. I don't mean to minimize what that 6 hours was, but can you begin to fathom what grace is extended just to the audience that's in this room tonight or who are watching us online tonight? The suffering of Jesus had a positive, permanent offering of a blessing. David Atkinson, in a little longer quote, says, both Job and his friends had been looking for an answer, looking for a cause, but all the searching for causes has proved useless. The three friends have ultimately had no answer for Job. The answer comes not in looking back, but in looking up. We must look forwards for the divine purpose, not hunt around for the causes in the past. Elihu has moved us from a backward-looking, retributive understanding of suffering to a forward-looking, redemptive one. There is a pain which heals. Now, as I've read these and some others during the course of getting ready for the lesson, I think they far exceed Elihu's real level. I don't know how much he grasped, but I'm telling you, Elihu had a fresh voice and a new idea that he was trying to articulate to a generation of folks who didn't find that very compatible with what they had always believed. And that is the idea of creative suffering. 3 passages. One is out of Psalm 119, 71. It is good for me that I was afflicted, so that I may learn your statutes. It doesn't tell the methodology of how that takes place. It just says it was good that I, was it a pandemic? Using the words probably totally out of context. It could have been that a pandemic caused somebody to have time to read their Bibles and caused them to reflect on the blessings that they could not currently experience. Is it possible that it was a debilitating illness? I remember John Gibson, who It was the Sixth and Izzard Church at the time in Little Rock, now Windsong. He's one of my favorite bulletin article writers, and he had this article on suffering, and here was his story. He said, I was headed to a speaking appointment for a weekend meeting somewhere, and I got sick, and I went to the doctor. And the doctor said, we're going to admit you to the hospital. You're going to have surgery. And I said, no, I don't have time. I've got to be speaking in somewhere 500 miles away this weekend. I don't have time. He said, we're admitting you to the hospital. You have to have the surgery. Cancel your speaking appointment. And he said, while he spent 7 days in a hospital room, flat on his back looking at the ceiling, he all of a sudden had an entirely new perspective of suffering through the eyes of the people that he'd been visiting and praying with for years in his ministry. He'd never been there. Now, we empathize to some degree by observation, but we empathize even greater by common experience. Well, this is learning the Word of God, finding time, being exposed to it. We used this passage a couple of weeks ago in John 9. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man who had been blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he would be born blind? The answers, causes, backward-looking, a punitive cause. And Jesus answered, it was neither for that this man sinned nor his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Wow. There is a creative purpose even in the midst of suffering, adversity. People who can't have full use of all the things that they wish they could. God was going to display something on a miracle that day that was going to change his life. It can be that way in ours too. And then finally in James chapter 1, consider it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. One of the tutors, one of the exercises, the training regimen of faith building, of endurance, of perfection and completeness are trials. And some of those may fall under the heading of suffering or adversity in life that Job experienced. Well, we've tried to have a ministry note for you to take each week, and we'll compile these when we're done. We're up to ministry note number 9. And I share this one with great caution because it is so easily abused. Be very cautious not to dismiss the reality of their pain, that is the people you're ministering to, but help others to see blessings in the midst of their darkness. It's a creative challenge to help a person hear the song in the night when they're in the night. And so it's not that we say, oh, listen, you shouldn't feel so bad. Let me tell you, you're so blessed. I mean, I know you just lost you got 3 other children who love you so much. And that's not that we don't minimize the experience. But part of our ministry is to be able to turn some light bulbs on. If it's nothing more than to be able to compliment and to say, you know, I've watched your family over what we've done this last 3 or 4 days or the 2 weeks you've been in the hospital. I want you to know I'm impressed with your kids. I'm impressed with your grandkids. I'm impressed that you have your Bible out every day to read. You see, you're planting a positive thought. You're exposing a blessing. You're exposing God's continued presence. Not accusatory, it's not substitutionary, it's not demeaning or minimizing. It's just trying to help people see. They have to see it themselves. You can't paint the picture. You can't stamp it in their head. But you have to, in a way, allow them to be able to see sunshine and hear the song in the night. Well, next week, we'll listen to what God has to say, and it'll be a telling conclusion to the drama And like I said, then we'll conclude it, make some application. Well, one of the things that is certainly true as we journey through the story of Job with his friends is that word. It's a journey. It's been a travel. In fact, they don't even know where they're going or how they're getting there yet, but they're on a journey, aren't they? We'll see a better picture of it when we finish it in chapter 42. And you know what? You and I are on a journey too. And sometimes we don't always see too clearly. It's like driving in a rainstorm and we can't see out the front windshield because the rain's coming down so hard. And now I can't see out my back window very well because my ceiling liner is hanging down. And when it gets damp, it hangs down where I can't. You look out a side window and it's murky because you've got some fog on it. And sometimes we go through life and we don't really know where we are in the journey. But every one of us, whether you're watching tonight online or whether you're here in the auditorium, you're on a journey. And my question as we stand to sing this invitation hymn of Jesus in just a moment is, where are you on your spiritual journey? You may be in an educational journey. You may be in a vocational journey. You may be in some kind of a house-building journey. But I'm interested tonight, especially in my life and yours, where are you on your spiritual journey? Are you getting closer to God or farther away? Or are you viewing God as that Redeemer, that surgeon who's trying to bless your life, to make you whole, to sustain you spiritually? Or have you been mad at God and you've kind of isolated yourself from God because of some of the problems that have been going on around you? And they're there. You're in the car. But tonight, as we sing our invitation hymn, would you listen to the words as we sing them? Would you make your commitment that tonight you're taking a step back toward God? And you're going to pray to God and ask Him to bless that closeness that you desire. And if you need to come and to share a need, have prayer with us here, please. If you're watching and you'd make a phone call this week and just share what's going on in your life, your heart, we'd love to be able to pray with you and talk to you. If you need to be baptized, this baptistry is ready all the time for you to put on Christ. Whatever your spiritual need in your journey, come while Mason leads us.